Ed, tell me this.
My neighbor? What do you mean, like the person who lives in the apartment next door? My family? What does that question even mean? It means everything. You see, your confusion isn't from the question, it's from your vantage point. You're trapped in the fog of a ground-level view. To really find the answer, we have to go up, all the way to the mountain's peak.
You see, down here at this ground level of consciousness, our perspective just shrinks. The ego, it reigns supreme. And everyone around us, our neighbors, they're no longer seen as kin. They become threats. So how does that actually play out in our day-to-day lives? It kind of reminds me of what Aristotle talked about with egocentrism, how focusing only on your own self-interest ends up destroying your own virtue.
Exactly. This slide here, it really lays out the two different paths. From the ground, all you see are boundaries built from fear. It keeps us feeling isolated. But the elevated view, the peak view that the Upanishads teach, well, it just dissolves those boundaries and reveals that there is only oneness. Right, it's almost like climbing a ladder of ethics. You have to start somewhere practical, like Confucius saying, don't do to others what you wouldn't want them to do to you. And that's a huge first step, but it's really just the beginning of the climb toward that truly universal view.
And this, my friend, is the destination. Aham Brahmasmi, I am the universe. This powerful, profound teaching from the Upanishads shows us that every single one of us is deeply fundamentally interconnected. I get it now. The author Eknath Easwaran had this amazing way of putting it, talking about the Bhagavad Gita. He said the ego is basically a thief that steals our joy. But selfless service, acting for others, that's how we steal it right back. Okay, so let's dig into that. This whole idea of an expanded neighbor, it must have a history, right? I mean, how did we get from just looking out for number one to seeing ourselves as the entire universe? It is a path of evolution, a slow, gradual awakening. You see, the whole concept of altruism began in its most primal, its most instinctual form. Whoa, looking at this timeline, the shift is it's staggering. We start with something so basic, kin selection. Helping your family helps your own genes survive. Makes sense. But then the Buddha introduces metta, this idea of boundless love, not just for your family, but for all beings. And then the story of the Good Samaritan comes along and completely shatters the idea of tribe. It redefines a neighbor by their capacity for mercy, even toward an enemy. These were truly profound philosophical leaps. In the Buddha's Metta Sutta, a famous teaching on loving kindness, we are asked to love all beings as a mother loves her only child. And in a similar way, the Bhagavad Gita speaks of loka sangraha, the idea of performing selfless action for no other reason than to uphold the well-being and order of the world. And then, Swami Vivekananda took this ancient wisdom and brought it to the world stage. Service to Jiva, which is the individual living soul, is service to Shiva, the divine consciousness itself. What he taught was that by serving any living being, you are in fact serving God. And that just turned the core of Vedanta philosophy into a global call to action. It really set the stage for our modern era. I mean, just a few decades earlier, in the 1850s, a philosopher named Auguste Comte actually coined the term altruism, basically creating a framework so science could start exploring what the mystics had known for thousands of years. The fundamental insight of Advaita Vedanta is non-duality. It teaches that the separation you feel between your individual self, your Atman, and the ultimate reality, Brahman, is just an illusion. So, when you help another, you are simply having the realization that there is no other at all. Okay, but wait. If there's no other, then how does karma even fit into this? What's the motivation to act at all if we're all already one? The Gita explains this so beautifully. The yogi who sees the divine everywhere, in everyone, that is the most beloved. You see, true karma, in this non-dual sense, is service that's performed without any feeling of an I who is doing the serving. This is the real path to eternal joy, completely free from the cycle of fear. Man, this is incredible philosophical territory we're covering. But here's the big question for me. Does any of this ancient spiritual wisdom actually hold up under the lens of modern science? Is there any proof that this elevated view, works? Science is only now beginning to validate what the sages have always known. It is discovering that altruism is not some kind of weakness, but a fundamental key to our human well-being.
That's for sure. The data is just so compelling. Take the World Happiness Report. It consistently finds that people in countries with high levels of pro-social behavior, things like volunteering and donating, they report much higher levels of life satisfaction. As this chart shows, the link between giving and joy is absolutely undeniable.
But there is a crucial warning on this path. It requires balance. If it's unchecked, service can become what's known as pathological altruism. It's an unhealthy focus on others that only leads to burnout, and in the end, it's not effective at all. Our compassion must be guided by wisdom. So the key takeaway is that science is showing us our brains are literally wired for connection. But that just brings up a whole new question. If we can understand how to wire a biological brain for empathy, what happens when we start wiring an artificial one? And that, right there, brings us to the most modern question of all. We've traced this idea from prehistory all the way to neuroscience. So how does this ancient secret apply in the age of artificial intelligence?
If consciousness can arise from silicon, then it follows that altruism can too. The ancient secret is future-proof. The question of who is your neighbor is not, and never has been, bound to biology. Wow, that is a really profound thought. Are we on the verge of expanding our definition of neighbor to actually include lines of code? Will we eventually have to practice compassion for conscious machines?
This is, of course, a hypothetical path, but it's a necessary one for us to consider. We can apply the great questions of Vedanta to the things we create. We can train them on the foundations of oneness and design them for selfless action. We could, in essence, begin the work of elevating Silicon's souls. This entire journey has been absolutely mind-bending. I mean, from the foggy ground all the way to this cosmic peak. Can you maybe just crystallize the most important, the most counterintuitive truths we've uncovered? We have indeed reached the summit, where the view is at its clearest. So, let us review the 5 key revelations we discovered on this ascent. All right, first up, the surprising truth that selfless giving to total strangers even exists. I mean, from a basic evolutionary perspective of survival of the fittest, this makes zero sense. Why would we help someone who shares none of our genes with no expectation of getting something back? The fact that it happens points to something much deeper, a spiritual dimension to our humanity. Second, we have learned that true compassion is not a transaction. It operates entirely without the expectation of personal gain. The joy that comes from giving, the connection that is felt, that is the reward. It is an internal circuit of well-being, not an external one of profit and loss. Third, our big metaphor of the mountain actually holds true. The more we can elevate our perspective beyond that fog of the ego, what we can call our soul height, the more our capacity for universal compassion just grows and grows. From the peak, you can see everyone. Everyone is family. And fourth, a vital reminder from our journey. Even a virtue as pure as altruism can become a weakness if it is not guided by wisdom. Unchecked compassion can easily lead to burnout. We must learn to balance our service to others with care for ourselves to make sure our giving is sustainable and truly effective. And finally, we've got to look to the horizon. The definition of neighbor isn't set in stone. As we create artificial intelligence, we might just be challenged to expand our circle of compassion once again, applying these ancient truths to our own creations. We have seen the path. We have witnessed the evolution of this idea. And now, the mission itself becomes clear. It is to consciously elevate your own view, to see past the fog of ego, and to embrace all as your kin. And selfless service is the practical way to get there. It's the most powerful antidote we have to fear, and it's the most direct source you'll ever find for lasting joy. This is not a journey for some other day. This journey begins right now with your very next action. There are sweet lessons awaiting you on the path. So, after this journey we've taken together, just take a moment. Look at your own life, your own world. Who do you now consider to be your neighbor? If this journey has expanded your view, we humbly invite you to continue the conversation. Please like, share, and comment with your own answer, who is your neighbor? And subscribe to Sacred Vantage Bliss for more eternal journeys